Hey, you guys, it's Miss Arneson, and I'm here this evening, and I'm recording at night instead of in the morning when I usually do because I literally spent the entire day today working on getting this information together for you. And so it might be 25 minutes long, but if it is, that's okay because I spent my entire day making it. So you can spend 25 minutes listening to it. But it's about what we need to do to keep this earth habitable for ourselves. And before we start and get into the how of this, we're going to talk about some myths that persist all over the place about climate change and solving it. So, for most of the time we've known that climate change was real, people have been believing that it's their responsibility to solve it because companies have been telling them that. I recently found out that Keep America Beautiful was actually founded by plastic companies. After World War II, people were trying to figure out how to make money because there was a whole bunch of stuff that was available. People had money because they were able to go to college on the GI Bill, and their wives were wanting to buy vacuum cleaners and stuff. So other companies were figuring out ways to make more money. And that's when they came up with disposable items like Dixie cups and plastic. And what was happening was that they didn't even know what to do with trash. They were like, we don't usually have trash. So they were just leaving it all over the place. And they left a whole bunch of glass bottles somewhere and cows started eating them and the cows were dying. So this one state, or I think it was a municipality, so it's like just a little city, was going to ban all the reusable items. And the companies found out about that and they were like, oh my gosh, we're going to lose a whole bunch of money. So what they did was found Keep America Beautiful to shift the blame of having all of these disposable glass bottles and plastic bottles and litter everywhere to people who were littering. And so they made this campaign. This is a more recent one where you recycle bottles, of course, and they can become a school bench. There's been a lot of them through the years. But it's basically like they created this to cover their own butts so they could keep making money while people were wasting a whole bunch of stuff. And I just thought that was crazy. There are some real life conspiracies here in this world. So even if you throw away your trash and you keep America beautiful by not littering, you cannot solve climate change like that because the problem is with the reusable or with the non-reusable items. This is my old house that Mr. Arneson and I just moved out of. We sold it in February or March of I don't know. We moved into this house in February. Wait, March. I don't know, something like that, right before COVID started. And Mr. Arneson and I had gotten solar panels on our house. But individual people and personal responsibility can't solve climate change because we were able to afford those solar panels, but not everyone can. And what if you live in an apartment and you're not allowed to get solar panels because you rent, you don't own? We can't rely on or shift all the responsibility to individuals to solve climate change. It's going to have to be the government. It's going to have to be a worldwide effort and not just about individual people's decisions. A lot of times, this is an old myth, which I hope you guys don't even believe anymore. But this one is that it's not a big deal, and there's debate about whether or not climate change was real. You remember from a previous lesson that the oil companies had sent out a whole bunch of scientists to figure out if climate change was real, what was going on. They were like, oh wow, our products, petroleum products like oil and gas, are making global warming happen. So instead of changing the way that they were doing business, they decided to spread a whole bunch of misinformation. This is another example of a real conspiracy right here, where they made people think, and they still think, that climate change isn't real, even though in the 1970s, the oil companies knew it was real. You can find internal documents that they did, and you can find that they were purposefully misleading the public to make money. Okay, Here's another myth. So you're looking at the climate accords from Paris in this lesson, and the goal is to keep the heating of the planet less than 1.5 degrees Celsius. But I just want you to know that that is not enough. That's enough to keep the oceans from rising so much because glaciers and ice caps are melting and millions of people's homes getting flooded. It's enough so that we can actually still grow crops and grow food. But it's not enough for our planet to go back to complete health. So even though we're going to do these things and we're going to make climate change lessened, it will not be enough, and we will have to do more to get the earth back to its really happy situation and equilibrium that was there before the Industrial Revolution. This is a myth that really annoys me. If you talk to a lot of politicians, they'll be like, well, we can't do this. A lot of companies, there's just not a way to do this. And there is a way to do it. Scientists have told us how to do it. They have given us technologies to do it. And so the problem is with the government. The problem is with the people who fund the government in a lot of ways. Companies are basically behind Congress people and the president, and they're keeping them from taking serious action. I know that sounds really like, I don't know, depressing or sad about democracy that money could do that. But if you really look at the evidence, that's what's going on here. And so that is a myth that we can't do anything about climate change. We know what to do, we know why we have to do it, and we have the technology to do it right now. But we aren't, because the powers that be are not letting us yet. Thankfully, you guys are all going to be voting in a few years, and you'll have a lot of power at that point. Okay, the last myth that I want to talk about really quick is one that I've noted before in this class, but I want to review it. We're destroying the earth by doing climate change stuff. We are poisoning the earth. We are making it so that it will not be around anymore. You guys, planet Earth is huge and we can't destroy it. And if you've seen some apocalypse movies, like I just watched Mad Max the other day, Fury Road, love that movie. It's a great sci-fi, but that is not what it would be like if we had a nuclear winter at all. So even though it's a good movie, it's fiction. We will not destroy this planet. If humans go away, say we were gone all in a second, we vanished from the earth would just take everything back. This is a picture of Chernobyl, which is, of course, where it's the town of hold on. Sorry, I had to look up the town. It's Pripyat, and this is the town that was close to the Chernobyl reactor that melted down in the 80s, and everyone had to leave here because the radiation is so high that people can't live there anymore. But you know what? The plants are taking over, and animals are starting to come on in here again, and this place is going to be taken over by nature, even though something happened that really destroyed humans' ability to live here. And it destroyed it for many, many hundreds of years. Here is another nuclear disaster that caused people to abandon their city and cars and stuff. This one is in Japan. And Japan has a very different climate than Russia, or this is in Ukraine, actually, former Soviet Union, but it has a different climate, and literally the cars have been covered in just a few years. They're totally covered. So the Earth's not going to be destroyed. You might not know this, but when the meteor hit the planet Earth that killed all the dinosaurs, it actually made the atmosphere of the whole entire Earth really freaking hot, and everything that was on the surface of the earth caught on fire and died. There was nothing really that survived on land. And we still got to this point today after the dinosaurs, because the earth will come back. Life will persist on this planet. What we're really destroying is our ability to enjoy living here. So this is a picture that I got, and this is a water scarcity image. So this is supposed to make you uncomfortable. This is a well, so it used to be full of water, and now this young man is down here, and this is the water that is left for his village. This is the earth we are making for ourselves, an earth that will not make us have good lives. You know, there's places in the world where this seems horrible to you. it looks like a miserable place to be. I do not want to have that little water and suffer through that. But things that you never imagined because you live in the United States of America, those things will come for us if we do nothing or not enough about climate change. Okay, so the IPCC report from 2018 is where I'm getting my information that's in this presentation. And good grief, it took me forever to get it together. When people are like, I researched this and that's how come I know that the vaccine's not safe. I'm like, you did not research anything. It takes a really long time to research because you have to find good sources, and those are actually kind of hard. The Paris Agreement, as you guys will read about in the next lesson, basically is this thing where almost the whole entire world, every country is part of it, and we are trying to keep warming of the planet under 1.5 degrees Celsius. That is the equivalent of 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit. And the reason they chose this is because it's basically like if it's worse than that, if it gets hotter than that, like we're really screwed. But we're only like partly screwed if we keep it under that level, and it'll be recoverable. We'll be able to fix our situation on the planet as long as we put in a lot of effort. This is the website where the information comes from. Just wanted to let you guys know because that's important. Sources are always important. The point of the Paris Agreement, which was made slightly before that IPCC report, is to get net zero carbon emissions by 2075. What that means is that we will not be putting out more carbon dioxide than we are pulling in. And that might sound crazy. How are we pulling in carbon dioxide? Well, one of the problems that we have to deal with is getting carbon dioxide out of the air. And there's ways to do that. Just so you know, this is 56 years from now. I will be 89 years old at that time. You can figure out how old you'll be. Just add 56 to your age. And we have to change everything that's going on this planet by that time. But the good news is we can do it. It's already figured out how to do it. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about emissions in general real quick. These are two charts that are going to be helpful for us. But in 2014, and I know that that's a few years ago, but it's the best I could find for getting this amount of information to you guys, because it's actually kind of hard to get data all together in a way where you can say, like, for sure, this is what it means. And that's why the science reports lag a little bit behind the actual time period that we're in. Well, in 2004, we had 9.795 gigatons of carbon. I just want you to know that you can also call this a petagram. So if you hear petagram, it means gigaton also, but it's specifically related to carbon. And I was like, I don't know what a gigaton is. Like, doesn't an elephant weigh 2 tons and 1 ton is 2,000 pounds? Like, I don't know. So here's what I did. I looked up how much this would weigh. And if we had 9 gigatons, we would have to have 132 billion people to weigh that much. Just so you know, I think there's about, I had to look up the population because it's changed since the last time I looked it up. We have on Earth 7.8 billion people on the planet right now. So imagine if we weighed all of those people, that would be just a teeny little like a teeny little part of a gigaton. And so we need to make sure that we keep these numbers in our mind and scale and think, like, even though this just looks little, right? 9.75, it's gigatons. It's not 9.75 sugar cubes. Okay, we're dealing with a lot more than that here. Okay, so here's what's going on in the globe, so in all the United States. So this is the world's emissions. The United States, of course, is just one country, so it's less than that. But of the whole world, these are the areas that get all of the energy that we use. So there's electricity and heat production, agriculture and other land uses takes a lot of energy. Forestry would be like cutting down forests. Transportation, so moving from place to place. Industry, building things. Okay, this is where our energy that we have goes. Now, here we're looking at who is using the most energy. So of that 9.795, we are contributing 15% of that. And 15% looks like a small chunk of this pie. It's gotten a lot smaller because China has industrialized, and so they're per capita putting out a lot more than they used to. But the United States is still one of the biggest users of energy. In fact, we put out 16.1 tons of carbon per person in 2015. So that is the weight of two killer whales, two adult male killer whales weigh about 16 tons. And so that is like totally crazy because we're just one person and we're putting out that much carbon. And you might be like, well, how much does carbon even weigh? Well, it doesn't weigh a lot. Remember, carbon is an element on the periodic table. So carbon is basically a bunch of atoms. And that many atoms, 16.1 tons of carbon, is used on each person in the year 2015, and it's something similar to that this year, but I just didn't look it up in that report. So this is a lot of carbon that we are using per person in the United States. I mean, like, I don't know, what it said on the report, it was like 2 point something in Europe. They've like drastically reduced theirs because they've been working on reducing it. But don't quote me on that number. I need to look it up because I might have just put something wrong on the internet, and I'm always talking about how you shouldn't trust something on the internet, so don't trust me on that number. But it's a lot less than what we do. Okay, so here's what we need to do. We need to reduce carbon emissions. That's a big deal in this. And so I've gone over some ways of how to do that. You are going to need to have some of these examples in your essay in your next lesson. So make sure that you're paying attention. In fact, if any of these sound really awesome to you, I would even jot them down so you don't have to watch this again or go back to this PowerPoint with this information. You'll already have it written down and you'll already know what you picked. So I'm going to go over these kind of fast, so feel free to pause if you need to. But there's these ideas basically, and then I've given you a little bit of information about each one afterwards. So carbon taxing. Carbon taxing would basically mean that people who are emitting more than a certain amount of carbon get taxed for it. So if you are doing a whole bunch of polluting, you have to pay extra. Why would that help? Well, we can take that money and we can use it to offset carbon, which means take it back out of the atmosphere. And there's actually a page on how to do that later. So basically the carbon tax would just make people who are big polluters, and by people I mean companies, because individuals are not producing a lot of carbon by themselves, but organizations or companies that are doing a lot of emissions, they would have to pay so that those emissions can be taken care of without making climate change worse or increasing emissions. Converting to clean energy. This is a huge one. Solar, wind, hydroelectric. There's a lot of ideas about how to use clean energy. These things, making them does use carbon. So you have to, in order to make solar panels and drive them over to my house and install them on my roof, there was carbon involved in that. But now that I have those solar panels, instead of relying on the electricity from El Paso Electric, which not all of that is generated by clean energy, I can tell you that, I have my own generation of energy on my roof. Lucky me, okay? I'm glad I was able to afford that. Not everybody can. So that's why I'm saying these things that we're talking about, they're going to have to be policy directed. What that means is that the government, and it could be the Las Cruces government, the state government, the government of the whole country, they are going to have to make this happen. They're going to have to force, basically, some way for people to be able to do this. So there's a lot of ways to do that. You can use tax incentives. So that's actually what was used for me to get solar panels. One of the reasons I was able to afford them on my personal level is that we got to write off the amount the amount the solar panels cost on our taxes, so we don't have to pay that many taxes. But if you did this for companies and you said, you know what, if you switch over to green energy, which is expensive in the beginning, then you're not going to have to be taxed on that amount of money. And that's a way to get people to do it. So tax incentive is going to be showing up a lot on here because it's a good way to make people do stuff that you want to do. And so I just want you to remember what that is. It means that you give someone a tax break for doing something that you want them to do. Okay, mandates. You can't mandate everything in the United States government. We have freedom, right? We're a democracy. And so you can't just be like, well, I mandate that everyone do this. There's actually been a lot of debate about that over the masks, right? People have been like, well, you can't mandate me. I have rights. Really, you'll have more rights if you put your mask on, because then you can go more places and COVID won't be so bad. I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent. But you can only mandate things on like government buildings. So if the federal government wanted to, and they did recently, they mandated that everybody's going to have to wear masks on government property. They can't do that for state property though. So they can't say that for state property, and they couldn't say that for you like in your house. Nobody can force you to wear a mask in your house, although it's not needed. But here, if we were talking about ways to switch over energy, you could do this. You could say, you know what, we're going to switch all the government buildings to whichever of these clean energy sources works at their location based on the geography. And that would be a good way to convert to clean energy. You could also, this is a big tool of the federal government. You could say, they've done this before in the past. So contingent state funding. States are not allowed to go into deficit. So we can't be in the red, like we can't spend more money than we have. But the federal government can. So when we need more money than we have, we rely on the federal government, the government of the United States, to give us that money so we can pay for our schools and Medicaid and all of that stuff. Well, you can say, if you do not, or let's say if you do, because then it's positive, if you reduce your carbon emissions by converting to clean energy sources in your state, and you reduce your emissions by 15%, then we will give you your state funding this year. And if you don't, then we won't. They can do that. So you can kind of force people to do stuff by incentivizing different things. And remember, we have to rely on these government things to fix climate change because the problem is bigger than any of us by ourselves. Green transportation. So here's some good ideas for that. Increasing public transportation. In Las Cruces, that's not really realistic, right? Most people can't take the bus because it takes you like 2 hours to get to your place when you're trying to get there on the bus. So we have to come up with something better for places like ours. But in cities, big cities, you could totally increase public transportation use. Electric cars, although you have to make sure that the electricity that you're using to power those cars is green energy. You can do this with policy, you can do this with tax incentives, mandates, contingent state funding, but there's one area where it's really hard to think of how they're going to develop the technology to make this work, and that's air travel. There's a lot of ways, like you can make a hydrogen car, right? You can make an electric car, but can you make an electric jet? I don't know. A lot of technology needs to go into that. So if you're interested in engineering, you could solve this problem for humanity by going into engineering and figuring out how we can fly without polluting so much, because flying, it really causes a lot of pollution. Okay, reducing consumption. This one is hard for people. Did you know that in order for you to buy your new smartphone, it takes 35 pounds of carbon emissions to make your new phone? So you might have been on the previous slide, like it's 16.1, what was it? I don't even remember. 16.1 tons of carbon per person in the United States. Well, some of that comes from making and transporting your smartphone to you. So we have to reduce consumption. We have to get people to buy less stuff. This is one thing that has annoyed me since I learned about it in college, called planned obsolescence. It basically means that companies figured out, if I make a really good washing machine and that washing machine lasts for 25 years, then they're not going to be buying a new washing machine for 25 years, and I won't make money after I've sold all the washing machines. So instead, things are basically built not to last. And that's really not good when it comes to climate change. Yeah, it might increase your profits, but if you have to buy all of these things, a whole bunch of energy and carbon emissions goes into making them. So that's a big issue that we have to address. Okay, here's one that you might not like. You might have to think about eating insects in your future. So apparently bugs, they do not cost very much carbon to make. So like you can grow bugs for people to eat, like mealworms, for example, and they do not cost a lot of energy. But if you look at beef, it takes 72 kilograms of carbon emissions. So remember, that's carbon atoms, the actual weight of the carbon atoms to make a kilogram of beef. That is a lot. It only takes 2 kilograms to make a whole kilogram of beans. So maybe we should be trading out some of our beef and meat products for something that's plant-based. There's a lot of people that don't want to do that. And here, I don't think policy or tax incentives are going to be the answer. It's going to have to be some sort of culture change where people are willing to give up meat products and animal products in favor of plant products because it's better for the planet. And I don't know if you can legislate that, but if you can think of a way, then you can put it in your paper. Okay, stop wasting energy. Oh my gosh, when I found this out, because I did not know this until this year in COVID while I was doing some research, the United States puts a lot of money and a lot of effort into getting all of this energy produced for our use. But do you know how much of it goes to waste? It's 58%. More than half of the energy that we make is wasted. What do I mean by wasted? Well, so for example, if you're at a gas well, and I don't know too much about gas wells, so this is kind of like a very kindergarten version of this. But if you have the gas coming out too fast and you can't capture it all, you could like have an explosion. It would be really bad and like it's not a good thing. So what they do is they burn the extra gas. They just burn it and it doesn't get used for energy. It doesn't get used for anything. It just gets used right then and there, pumped into the atmosphere so that we have more carbon dioxide. Another example is if there is too much electricity in the electrical grid, it basically literally gets pumped into the ground and doesn't do anything. So we absolutely, in order to solve the climate change crisis, we have to stop wasting more than half of the energy that we produce. That's absolutely nuts. That's a good engineering problem too. Okay, consider nuclear energy. This is not popular for everyone because nuclear energy can cause disasters like Chernobyl and the Fukushima one that you guys just saw the picture of in Japan. It is not exactly clean. It does not put off carbon dioxide, though. It just provides nuclear waste. So you have to figure out where to get rid of your nuclear waste. But just to give you an example of how efficient it is, it takes less than 1 pound. It takes 0.035 pounds of uranium to power a light bulb for an entire year and keep it on 24/7. In order to do that with coal, it would take 714 pounds of coal. In order to do it with natural gas, which is a gas, so remember, gases are not very heavy, so this is a lot of natural gas, it would take 143 pounds. So that is something we have to consider, I think, when we're doing this, but it doesn't have to be one of the things you choose for sure. Okay, we have to stop throwing things away, like disposable things. So remember that trash. People didn't know what trash really was for a lot of human history. That is new. It's come about since the 50s, really, the 40s and the 50s. We need policies perhaps to stop this, and maybe something like a garbage tax. So like if you have, your carbon tax, you're putting out too much carbon. If you're wasting too much stuff, you're throwing away too much plastic, you're not using reusable bottles or whatever, maybe there's a tax for that so that people use reusable bottles instead. The one big area that I feel like this has a lot of issues in is the medical field. A lot of plastics get used in the medical field, and it's because it's safe, and it's literally not safe to reuse a lot of things in the medical field. So there has to be a lot of innovation in that field. We absolutely need to stop using coal like right now. Clean coal is an LOL myth. It's totally ridiculous. We need to find green jobs for the people who are in the coal industry, though. Those people are supporting their families and they work hard and they deserve to work hard at another job that doesn't, make the planet uninhabitable for us. Okay, scrubbing carbon from the air. This is this is like so weird. So the easiest way, and we've already talked about it in a different lesson, is reforestation. If you plant plants where we've cut them down, you're basically reforesting. So much of the world's forests have been cut down. We need to replant about an area the size of Canada. And Canada is either the second or third largest country in the whole world, depending on how you define it. We're actually the second or third largest. So some people put Canada first, some people put us first. The biggest is Russia, and the next is us, or Canada. So that's a lot of reforestation, and we need to do it. we need to capture it at factories. So factories, burning things, they're putting out a whole bunch of carbon. Well, if we could capture it and turn it into something like, for example, there's organisms that convert it into a liquid alcohol so you can like store it somewhere. I don't think it's like a drinkable type of alcohol. There's a lot of different types. But we could do that so that that carbon isn't going into the atmosphere. And then there's direct air capture. So this is a model of someone's idea, engineering idea to capture carbon. It's fans out in the middle of nowhere. You turn the fans on, it sucks the air through, captures the carbon, turns it into a solid or a liquid of some type, and then it doesn't go into the atmosphere, which I think is pretty cool. All right, and then here's some random ideas that people have come up with to help with climate change. So we want to force feed plankton blooms. So plankton, there's a couple of different things in the ocean, right? There's algae. Algae are going to be making, they're going to be taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and making it into carbohydrates and then putting out oxygen. So they're like bonus, really great organisms that are doing this. Well, we're thinking of force feeding them things that contain extra carbon so that they can take in even more carbon when they're blooming. Maybe. This is a picture of what a plankton bloom would look like from space. Isn't that kind of cool? Okay, fake volcanoes. So when you put a whole bunch of particles into the atmosphere, they block solar radiation. So what if we make like fake volcanoes and we spew a bunch of stuff into the atmosphere so that it cools down? Huh? Okay. And then blocking the earth with a sun shield. So like literally like putting up a UV umbrella to stop solar radiation getting from the planet Earth so that it stays cooler. I just can't even imagine how much that would cost. Okay, making clouds to increase albedo. So clouds reflect a lot more sunlight than the surface of the earth or the ocean do. They absorb a lot more. So if we can reflect that light, then it won't be heating up the planet and that'll slow global warming. Maybe feeding cows garlic so that they fart less methane. Okay. And then there's also sometimes companies do the right thing. For example, recently Starbucks decided not to give out plastic straws. They changed the way their cups work. You have to ask for a straw now, so they're not saying, no, we won't give it to you. But sometimes companies do the right thing and they will make something that helps the environment, even if they're not forced to by the government. Okay, guys, I think that's all. I know this was super long, but I love you. Thank you for listening.